BP oil suspected on Gulf of Mexico seafloor. Samples taken from the seafloor near BP's blown-out wellhead indicate miles and miles of murky, oily residue sitting atop hard sediment. Moreover, inside that residue are dead shrimp, zooplankton, worms, and other invertebrates. I expected to find oil on the seafloor, Samantha Joy, a University of Georgia marine sciences professor, said Monday morning in a ship-to-shore telephone interview. I did not expect to find this much. I didn't expect to find layers 2 inches thick. The scientists aboard the research vessel Oceanus suspect it's all from the BP spill, but we'll have to wait until they return to shore this week to confirm it's the same oil source. It has to be a recent event, Joy said. There's still pieces of warm bodies there. If it is BP oil, it could undermine the federal government's estimate that 75% of the spill either evaporated, was cleaned up, or was consumed by natural microbes. In other words, the federal government's estimate is not the truth. What the scientists do already know is that the oil is not coming naturally from below the surface. What we found today is not a natural seep, Joy wrote in her blog on September 5th, when the first surprise sediment was found. The near-shore sediments contained grayish muddy clay and a thin layer of orange-brown oil at the surface, she added. Oil seeping naturally would create an oily stain throughout the sediment cores, but these samples only had oil at the top. The oil obviously came from the top, down from the water column, not the bottom, up from a deep reservoir, Joy wrote. The researchers also have a name for it, a slime highway. That's because they're confident much of the oil was trapped by mucus coming from microbes that feast on oil in a natural process that helps break up the contaminant. Those microbes are well documented. The organisms that break down oil excrete mucus, copious amounts of mucus, Joy told National Public Radio. So, it's kind of like a slime highway from the surface to the bottom, because eventually the slime gets heavy and it sinks. Another factor that could be trapping the oil was the earlier use of chemical dispersants, which might have made the oil so small that it wasn't buoyant enough to rise. In other words, BP hid the oil spill. Joy wrote that the scientists called the substance oil aggregate snow because it settled down the water column to the seafloor, just like snow falls from the sky to the ground. If you take a close look at the snow layer, oil aggregates are clearly visible, she added. Also visible are petropod shells, which must have been recently deposited because the shells dissolve rapidly, and remnants of zooplankton, skeletons, and dead worms and their tubes. The researchers took new samples on Monday and Sunday and hope to take several more, especially closer to the wellhead, before they return. And what will they find then? It's weird, the stuff we found last night, Joy said. Some of it was really dense and thick. The samples have come from seafloors at depths ranging from 300 to 4,000 feet deep. Since the well was capped on July 15th, and after some 206 million gallons flowed into the Gulf of Mexico, there have been signs of resilience on the surface and the shore. Oil sheens have disappeared, while some marshlands have shoots of green. This seeming recovery is likely a result of massive amounts of chemical dispersants, warm waters, and a Gulf that is used to degrading massive amounts of oil, scientists say. Animal deaths are also far short of worst-case scenarios, at least for now. But at the same time, a massive, invisible plume of oil has been found under the surface, shifting scientists' concerns from what can be easily seen to what can't be. Again, so the oil spill has basically sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And all these are more signs. Revelation chapter 16, verse 3. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. 4. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became as blood. The BP oil spill is creating a huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, and it will happen over time, years, perhaps decades, and maybe even generations. For Ian McDonald, a Florida State University biological oceanographer who wasn't part of Joy's team, the latest findings confirm that government assessments about how much oil remains, especially a report on the subject by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in August, were too optimistic. Way too optimistic. The oil did not disappear, he said. It sank. Deep sea animals, in general, tend to produce fewer offspring than shallower water animals. So, if they're going to have a population impact, it may be more sensitive in deep water. There's also some evidence that deep sea animals live longer than shallower water species, so the impact may stay around longer. At first, scientists, the media, and the federal government focused their attention on tracking rainbow sheens approaching land, tar balls hitting beaches, measuring oil in marshes, and scouting for oiled birds and sea turtles. But a spate of recent studies increasingly points to the deep. As we get into weathered oil, there's more likelihood that it will get into the sediment on the seafloor, said the chief scientist at the National Marine Fisheries Service, a division of NOAA. Getting a handle on where the oil is at extreme depths will not be easy. Scientists will have to use expensive 1,000-pound devices that look like moon landers. The spindly-legged machines land on the bottom and shoot tubes into the seafloor to collect 20-inch-long samples. The terrain is exceedingly difficult. The area where the busted BP well sits is on the continental slope, formed by millions of years of deposits from the Mississippi River. It's a region of bumps and valleys, salt domes, canyons, and slopes. Government scientists acknowledge they've not done enough to look for oil in the obscure corners of the Gulf's bottom, but they promise to do a better job someday. Joy's latest discovery backs up the findings of a University of South Florida crew that reported pulling up oily sediment in August. There is also oil still coming or seeping up from the seafloor all around the BP wellhead. And again, Revelation chapter 8, verse 6. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. 7. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. 8. And the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became as blood. And yes, these are more signs of the end times, transition days, which is a continuing daily process.